Hi, welcome back to the Loving Challenger podcast. I'm your host, Megan Bhatia. Thank you for spending your time here. Whether or not you stay for 5 minutes or the entire thing, I really want to say your time and attention is the most valuable resource you have. So thank you. Thanks also for subscribing to the podcast if you want to follow along on whatever it is that I'm sharing here. I'm not quite sure if I'm going to share this podcast first about boundaries, or I'm going to share the super vulnerable video diary that I did. If you watch that one first, please know I'm okay. That was a beautiful moment of processing for me, and it is really something that I'm challenging myself lovingly, is to strip away the facade and really be as present and as authentic as I can in my human experience. And then the other side is really to reflect on teaching, learning, everything that it is that I'm learning that I want to share. I think I'm a teacher at heart, and that's why I'm recording this episode about boundaries. Now, a couple years ago, I really started to get introduced to the idea of boundaries. Before that, I don't think I had any clue. I didn't know the word. I didn't really know the concept. I didn't know the concept. And now I feel like I've gone through my 101 course on boundaries over the last few years. And I feel like I'm now circling back, as I do, or we do, around our learnings in our life, spiraling around topics, to revisit the topic of boundaries. And it has expanded. So I'm going to share the more expanded version with you. I'm so open to what you have experienced around your own learning of what is this concept that we call boundaries. How do you use it? And yeah, anything that you want to engage in dialogue, I'm here. Okay, boundary. A boundary. What is a boundary? For our purposes here, we could talk about biology. A boundary is like our skin is a boundary between the outside world and the inside world. In a cell, the boundary is the cell wall. It allows things to come in and out. And a boundary, I think, from our human experience is not only a physical thing, like where in the world do we place our body? Even that decision on where we place our body is a mental and emotional question or process. So really for the human consciousness experience, a boundary is it's a conversation, I guess. And that conversation changes over time. So that conversation, that is maybe the question of what do I want to allow into my physical space? What do I want to allow into my mental space? What do I want to allow into my emotional world? What do I want to allow into my spiritual world? And we forget that we have choice and agency over this. The risk of not understanding boundaries is that you are completely giving up your power to even understand that you have a choice in where you put your body and what conversations you engage in and what it is that you do day in, day out. That choice can also be a very heavy responsibility because, using boundaries, it requires the ability to be with some pretty heavy emotions because most of the time we're not using a boundary and having a great time with it. Usually there's some mental, emotional, physical strife with it. So, okay, back to what a boundary is. At the most basic level, it is what we have control of in our own agency. It's where we put our physical body, the conversations we engage in. It is not telling someone to do something or not do something. That is not a boundary. A boundary can sound like a threat, but it's not a threat. It's really just action, consequence. For example, if you are friends with someone who is an alcoholic and you are starting to realize that you get dysregulated around their use of alcohol, maybe it's triggering something from your past, maybe it's just a behavior you don't agree with, but you really love this friend. So you're torn. And you could say, you're not telling the friend to stop drinking. You don't have any control or agency over that. You have agency over saying where you put your physical body. And so you might say, hey, friend, I love you. I love you dearly. And when you drink alcohol, it really dysregulates my system. Or I really have a hard time watching you drink alcohol because I can see its impact on you and your life. So I am making the choice that if you drink alcohol, I'm just not going to be around. Now, if you said it a different way, it could be like a threat. If you drink any more alcohol, I'm leaving you. Yeah, threat, but honestly, that's a boundary coming out as a threat. because it is your personal agency. You could say it more lovingly, saying, I love you so much. It really pains me or hurts me, and I'm having a really hard time, and I'm making the choice to not be around you if you are making the choice to drink alcohol. That's a boundary. And then upholding that boundary, it can cause pain, because then you have to leave physical proximity of someone that you love and that you care about. You have to watch someone do something to themselves that you don't have control over, so you're removing yourself. And removing yourself, that can be really painful. So I give this as an example, kind of an extreme example of a boundary, but really just to illustrate illustrate that boundaries are something that you have agency over. It is generally action. If this action happens, consequence. I will put myself over here. For example, with a partner, if you say, partner, I love you. If you start yelling, I have a hard time being with that in my body. I am going to physically remove myself from your physical location because I get dysregulated, and that's something I'm not willing to do. I'm happy to have a conversation, just not around yelling. Great boundary, right? It took me a while to learn that one personally. So yeah, this is super important, I think, as we learn to create the environment of the relationships that we want. Okay, so that is what a boundary is, what a boundary isn't. Why do we need boundaries? We need boundaries to maintain healthy, loving relationships. The quote by Prentice Hemphill I love is, a boundary is the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. The boundary is the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. Now, at some points, that could be super close with someone. Like, there doesn't have to be a lot of distance, physical, mental, emotional distance. Sometimes that distance has to be huge. Live in a different state. Remove your physical body. Not talk about certain conversations with family, so that you can maintain a loving relationship. It's not avoidance. Avoidance is when you are choosing to do something out of fear. A boundary is when you acknowledge that you are 100% responsible for regulating your nervous system. And if your nervous system gets dysregulated or triggered by some outside environmental stimulus, that you are knowing that you regulate your system by blocking that information, blocking the physical experience, blocking the conversation, blocking whatever there is to block. That's a membrane, right? Let's talk about containers here, though, because blocking can be good for a certain amount of time. And then, what if you do desire a close relationship with that friend or your partner? And you realize if you keep blocking your partner or, can't spend time with them, then that's going to really inhibit the growth or that relationship in general. So you can start working and flexing those boundaries. And that is all about the container. It's all about the container, the safe container to explore and expand those boundaries. I'm going to use the example of a cold water plunge first, because that's a lot easier to understand. Let's say you were outside on a very cold day and your friend said, hey, I know what you need to work on. You need to work on your system, your nervous system regulation. I'm going to push you into cold water so that you can work on that. And they push you into that cold water unconsensually, non-consensually, without consent. That is a trauma-inducing, trauma-creating experience. Lack of trust with that partner or that friend. You didn't get agency to opt into that experience. That is the opposite of a safe container. A safe container with the same experience of you being in that ice cold water might be, hey, I know that I've heard that working on nervous system regulation can be really tested, and you can grow your nervous system response by going into cold water. And I want to work on that. So I'm going to put myself into a tub of cold water, cold ice water, on purpose when I say I'm ready, and I'm going to dictate when I go in and when I come out. Right? Same experience of being in the cold water, but you are the one that is at agency, at source of that experience. That is a safe container. And you can jump in for 30 seconds and then you can get back out and go, whoa, that was really hard. But now I have the experience and the knowledge of myself of someone that is able to withstand ice cold water for 30 seconds, right? Then next time you're like, oh, I'm going to go in for a minute. And then you go in for a minute. This is a really safe container to expand out boundaries, because boundaries are all connected to our sense of safety. That is why we have boundaries. It is our sense of safety that is at source. And even if our mind wants us to be safe, right? Our mind could be like, oh, you're totally safe being around that person, or oh, you're totally safe being in that situation. Your mind could say it, but your body could be telling you otherwise. Not safe, not safe, not safe. Shows up in the form of being dysregulated, triggered, right? So when you work on these triggers in a safe, consensual way, it is exposure therapy. You are exposing yourself to that trigger in a way that keeps you at source. And that is like your shell. You are expanding your boundaried shell. This could be, again, in a physical way, it could be in a mental, emotional way, but you are at source of expanding this space. That is a safe container. Now, I can tell you, ultimately, I love the idea of, personally me, being able to walk around the world having any experience and feeling safe. I'm not there. I doubt I will ever be in this lifetime in that space. I work on it by trying to regulate myself, create a safe space for myself, but I'm not always there. And I know that my nervous system, I have a nervous system. I'm a human being. I'm a mammal. It has capacity on what it can take before it starts to feel overwhelmed, overstimulated, triggered, whatever you want to say. On a day-to-day moment or even hour-to-hour moment, that can change, right? So the window of tolerance that is the container of me to experience myself in the world and also need certain boundaries is constantly fluctuating, constantly. I could have certain overload mental capacity and I can't deal with anymore. So of course I'm going to want to shut out any mental stimulation. I could be physically overwhelmed. I can't do one more physical task. I need to shut out or stop physical stimulation. Sometimes it could be all of the above at the same time. So our ability to use boundaries is what helps us navigate the world and stay in our nice window of tolerance the best we can. And also, here's the most recent lesson I have learned is to forgive myself when I can't. To forgive myself when I'm out of my window of tolerance and I need a specific boundary in my life. My mind would like to say, like, hey, Megan, you shouldn't need this boundary. It should be totally fine of X, Y, and Z, fill in the blank. But in full recognition, my mind could be saying that, but my body's like, totally jacked, can't handle one more thing, need a boundary, need to stop a stimulation, need to stop an experience. I used to blame and shame myself for not being able to do more, be more. And I realized that was completely not helping me. Just not helping me. And it definitely wasn't creating a safe container for me to expand my boundaries, because I would already be at max capacity and I would be pushing myself past my limits, and then therefore have this kind of spiral effect of myself of, number one, not being a safe place for myself. And number two, also having this image of myself that I'm not capable of handling myself or my life, only because I kept pushing myself outside of my comfort zone. So as much as I would like to say, have my spiritual ego all about me, like I'm capable of handling everything, I'm not. I heard, if I shared my other video first, you heard me at my threshold. That was actually, that was coming down from my threshold when I was finally letting go of my emotional, I was letting go of that hard shell, that boundary that I created around me. And I let it go because I was finally safe and feeling safe in myself, feeling safe to say, Megan, you don't have to do it all. You don't have to be it all. It's okay to have limits, to have boundaries. It's okay to communicate those. And it's definitely okay to take action on those without shaming or blaming myself. And ultimately, the people that I want to keep around in my life are the ones that understand that, the ones that are like, oh, it'd be great, if she was capable of this, but, I definitely understand that she's at max capacity and this is not what she's capable of handling right now. And yeah, to see me as human. Those are my friends. Those are the people I want to keep around me. And vice versa. I want to be able to do that for my good friends too. And I have a good friend, and I just went through a recent experience where, this was maybe a month ago, she was going through some major stuff and she needed to kind of block me out for a little bit. And I was so proud of the work that I've done around boundaries because I knew that by giving myself that space to communicate, like, hey, I'm not good. I actually need to like stop communicating for a little bit. Um, I know how that feels. And that was the grace I gave to her. It was like, hey, friend, I love you. You know, whether or not it takes a day, a week, a year, I totally respect your need for space. I totally respect that. You do you. I love you. I'll love you from afar. Right. And it was shortly after that, less than a week, that that friend came back, was like, oh, thank you for that space. I needed it. It was going through something super heavy and emotional, and it wasn't about you. It was some childhood stuff that was coming up that was getting triggered. And I got through it and I worked myself through it. And I knew that by me creating a loving space for her to handle that, for her to have boundaries, communicate those boundaries, to be held in that, I knew that that was part of her experience of being able to work through that probably so quickly. I didn't add to it. I didn't compound her overwhelmed state by her needing to process my own reaction to her boundaries. That would not have been helpful. That probably would have severely hurt the friendship and the relationship. So I know that this is from both sides, that the more I work on and understand my own capacity of myself to regulate, my own ability to communicate when I can't regulate and I need to remove my physical body from someone, I need to stop a conversation. I need to even stop with myself. A lot of these things we can have with ourselves too in our own mind, to say, Megan, this is not helpful. You need to stop this thought path right now. Or, hey, go take a nap, get some sleep. To have boundaries with myself, internal boundaries, that could be a whole other conversation. It is the same process. It's kind of like doing this whole thing, what I talked to you about with my friend and what I just went through with our different inner parts, where one part might need something because it doesn't feel safe. And the other part, instead of coming at it and judging it, could say, I totally hear you, part. I'm here with you. Do what you need to do. I got your back. We can work together on this. We're not going to fight each other. So lessen the internal conflict around, needing space from anyone, even ourselves. So there you go. This is my current reflection on boundaries. I think I covered everything. I just want to remind you to be be easel on yourself. Be easy and gentle on yourselves, because we are navigating new waters. I think there's a lot of changes that we're going through. And I think understanding boundaries, how to use them lovingly with ourselves, how to communicate this lovingly to the people around us when we can, and when we can't, just to know and trust ourselves to say, I'm allowed to remove my physical body from this space. I'm allowed to stop talking in this conversation because I feel triggered. I'm allowed to have boundaries. Every living being and thing has boundaries, many of them physical. And for us humans, we get the delight of having to navigate the space of mental, emotional boundaries as well. So hope you found this helpful. Subscribe if you like these episodes. If you want to talk more about this, or if you find that you are looking to build up your capacity, your own safe container to expand your boundaries, or to even institute and take action on boundaries that you know that you need to keep yourself healthy and regulated, I'm here. Schedule a free call with me for 20 minutes. I promise you it will be worth your time. And thanks for listening. Thanks for listening. Thanks for listening. I hope you have a beautiful, beautiful day. Bye, my friends.